Last thing, Irileth. This isn't a death or glory mission. I need to know what we're dealing with.
Things I can handle. This talk of dragons? World gone mad, I say.
I serve Jarl from Adria? Ah, thank you. Please, take these few coins for services rendered. Enjoy your visit to Dragon's Reach.
Nope, 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 nope. Alright, we're out. So, gonna kill the dragon. Any ideas what we should do after we kill the dragon?
Good luck.
I don't think scale mail works that way. I mean, I'll collect the milk and drink it, but I don't think scale mail is going to make me find more of it.
No signs of any dragon right now, but it sure looks like he's been. I know it looks bad. We've got to figure out what happened. And if that dragon is still skulking around somewhere. Spread out.
Why are you the only one with the mask? What have you got to hide? What are you hiding? Got my eye on you. Wait, I think I know why he's the only one without a mask. Just a hunch, but give me a second.
Let's save us. Here he comes again.
Alright, he's there. Do you die? I'm gonna guess yes. Hello. Howdy. Ow. Come on. Okay, well. Potions. I would say that's a yikes, yes. Come here. Ow! Why are you attacking me? I didn't do anything to you. Did I? All right. Come here. Be gone. Give me your shit. Come on. What was that sound? Come here. Yes, give me sustenance. Fendel, you're a prick.
Turn around and go back the way you came.
We're causing no trouble. All we ask
I don't care what you're doing. After what happened, you're lucky I don't toss you in jail. Now get lost.
we will be back. This is not over.
Of course it isn't. When's it ever over?
You there.
Ugh.
We're looking for someone in Whiterun. Here, I'd like you to have this as a token of my friendship. I've got your back. I'll show you what I know. What do you want me to carry? You lead, I'll follow.
Let's see. Don't have enough to do alchemy. Speech could be handy, but no. Pickpocket. No. Sneak knock. Already have that high enough. Archery, eh. One-handed. Okay. Smithing. Just because I'll need to get it eventually. Fucking... There.
You're someone who can get things done. I like that.
Piss off. But no, what I was saying was, do I go Mage's College? Do I go Dark Brotherhood? Should I try to go to Solstheim? Should I start building my mansion? Come on.
Good. You're finally here.
So what happened at the watchtower?
Should I start up on the regular storyline?
I knew I could count on Ireland. Dragonborn. What? So it's true. Masters of the way. The dragon. If you heard the summons, what else could it mean? The Greybeards.
Didn't you hear the thundering sound as you returned to Whiterun? That was the voice of the Greybeards summoning you to High Northtown. This hasn't happened in centuries, at least.
If I need to do that, you.
I'm right behind you. What do you want me to carry? You lead, I'll follow.
What nonsense. Why, you puffed up ignorant. These are our sacred traditions that go back to the founding of the First Empire.
Well, that's the thing. I also need to get the stuff to start it up, and then I'll also need. God, what was I gonna say? I'll also need enough gold. Because it costs a decent amount to get it and then to start it up. I reported back to him. Prick.
Izmi, you did it. You killed the
Shut up.
dragon.
No matter. Go to High Hrothgar. Learn what the Greybeards can teach you. You've done a great service for me and my city. By my right as I assign. We are back to business, Proventus. We still have a city to defend.
Yes.
Okay. The quickest way I can think of to get gold is obviously either the Thieves Guild or the Dark Brotherhood. But my question to you is, should I join the Dark Brotherhood or should I destroy the Brotherhood? Which is a thing you can do. So, I'm gonna take that as join the Dark Brotherhood because you kill people anyway. Alright. Lydia. Thieves Guild, then Brotherhood? Alright. Leave me alone, Lydia. So, I need to go to Riften. Honestly, good thing I'm working on my, pickpocketing then.
I've been looking for you. Got something I'm supposed to deliver. Let's see here. Ah, a letter from the Jarl. Looks like that's it.
Alright, so that starts up that. Oh, shut up. Why am I running there? I can just fast travel. Wait, it was Riften that's the Dark Brotherhood's in.
Need a ride? Where do you want to go? Climb and back and we'll be off. If you've never been to Riften, be sure to visit the Blackfriar Mead. A few mugs of that and you'll forget all.
Yep, there it is. So, I'm assuming you also want me to keep reading all the books that I get. Does it, books, and does that include letters?
Hold there. Before I let you in, for the privilege of entering the city, what does it matter? Hold there. Before I let
Yes
you
to
into
what?
Riften, you need to pay the visitor's tax. For the privilege of entering the city, what does it matter? All right, keep your voice down. You want everyone to hear
my
you?
advice.
I'll let you in.
Alright. I will proceed to read every single book that I come across. I'll read so many books that you'll become tired of it.
I had another run-in with a thief's guild.
I don't know you. You and Riften look... Yeah? Well, you can pretend not to hear me.
I'm really getting tired of your excuses. When you borrowed the money, you said you'd pay it back on time and for double the usual fee.
The Bee and the Bob. When you say barb, do you mean barbecue?
People of Riften, heed my words.
I've never seen Mjol this upset about anything. The city really gets to her.
This is one of the signs. The signs that Lady Mara is displeased with your constant inebriation. Put down your
Mjol told me
flagons
that it
filled
isn't
with
this
your
bad
vile
everywhere.
liquids, and
Maybe
embrace
one day
the
I'll venture
teachings
out
of
and
the
see if
handmaiden of Khan.
Let's sate that appetite. No, Maramo. We talked about this. Talon?
Kira, my skill in battle is uncertain of an understanding. Fortunately,
fear
people
that
must
you
be
soon
made
may leave
aware
us.
of the chaos they've sown.
Riften has problems of its own.
Enough,
Now
Maramo.
is not
We've
the
all
time.
heard of the dragons and their return.
Where's Brynjolf?
You say that.
He's normally
Your
here.
allegiance lies with the Empire.
Very well, Talon.
We haven't much.
I'll
Eren,
remove
I
myself
owe you
from
my
this
life.
den of iniquity.
It would
We're
take a
not
threat to
kicking
all
you
of
out.
Skyrim for
Just
me
keep
to
the
depart.
sermons at the temple and let us all sin in peace.
Ooh. Nightingales, Fact or Fiction. By Wilhelmina Roth. Mention the nightingale to any thief worth his salt, and he'll laugh in your face. He'll tell you that the supposed avengers of the Daedric Lord Nocturnal are nothing but fictional characters who live nowhere else but within tales designed to scare young footpads into doing what they're told. But are they fictional or simply misunderstood. While it's true that most scholars would scoff at the notion of a holy sect appearing within the normally unethical and unorganized rabble that is the Thieves' Guild, evidence suggests that such a group existed at one time within the borders of Skyrim. 120 years before the publication of this tome, a corpse was discovered wearing a strange suit of armor that was described as Forged Midnight. The tattered armor bore a crest of some sort, the symbol of a bird embracing a circle of undetailed blackness. The remains and the armor was taken to the College of Winterhold for study, but mysteriously vanished only a day after it arrived. The crest from this armor was circulated around Skyrim for years, but identification proved almost impossible. Then the most unlikely of sources, a prisoner incarcerated within the mines of Markarth, claimed that it was the mark of a group of thieves who called themselves the Nightingales. When pressed for more information, the prisoner claimed that the Nightingales were warriors of Nocturnal and performed her bidding without question. He claimed his source was someone he knew within the Thieves' Guild of Skyrim, but he refused to identify them by name, so his story was quickly dismissed. The second piece of evidence pointed to the existence of the Nightingales exists to this day just outside of Riften. Discovered at the terminus of a short pathway off the main road stands a stone of unidentified black material. Carved into its face is the same avian symbol previously found on the dark suit of armor. To those that subscribed to the existence of the Nightingales, this was thought to be some sort of a meeting place. To others, this symbol was once again dismissed as a hoax, or simply a diversion created by the Thieves' Guild. The final and most controversial sample of evidence is a passage found scrawled on the inside of a cell wall in Whiterun. The cell had previously been occupied by a Dunmer named Lorthis and was incarcerated for murder and was set for execution. After the deed was performed and Lorthis' cell was examined, the following was found etched into one of the stone blocks. Take my hand, my lady, nocturnal, for it is my will to serve you. As a nightingale, I'm born anew. Let my past echo our triumph. This was the first and only time that a solid connection between Nocturnal and the Nightingales had been made. The unusual nature of the passage, the religious connotations towards Nocturnal, made a career criminal kept discussions lively for years regarding the possibility of this group actually existing. Sadly, since not a single piece of evidence beyond this had surfaced to date, this exciting discovery faded into obscurity and the debate subsided. With these scant samples of evidence, conclusions are difficult to formulate. All we're left with are more questions than answers. Can religion and thievery coexist? Does the Daedric Lord Nocturnal have active agents roaming Skyrim with a no doubt nefarious purpose? Does the Thieves' Guild have extensive knowledge of the Nightingales but remain sworn to secrecy? Perhaps one day the answers to these questions will be revealed, but at present it falls to you, the reader, to decide whether the Nightingales are fact or merely fiction. Honestly, not a bad book. Of Crossed Daggers by Dwenin Windell. Windell? That sounds familiar. I'm sure it's nothing. Alright. Situated on the eastern banks of Lake Honrich, or Honrich, whichever one, the city of Riften serves as a reminder of a bygone era. The once proud streets and buildings have vanished and been replaced with a collection of wooden structures and rough stonework shrouded in a permanent fog-like mist. In order to understand how such a large city became nothing more than a glorified fortress, one need only look to the history books for answers. Riften was a major hub of activity for trade caravans and travelers to and from Morrowind. Fishing skiffs could be seen dotting the lake at all hours of the day, and the bustling city was alive with activity at night. The city guard was formidable and maintained a tight grasp on its populace, keeping them safe from harm. The marketplace in Riften was also quite a draw, containing numerous stands offering wares from across Tamriel. In the 98th year of the Fourth Era, amidst the confusion of the Void Knights, Hosgun Cross Daggers was installed as Jarl when the previous Jarl had been assassinated. Although many believe that Hosgun was responsible and cries of protest filled the streets of Riften, the Jarl took the throne and immediately took action to protect his station. Using the city guard, he had the streets cleared of protesters and initiated a curfew. Any caught breaking the curfew was immediately jailed without process or executed, if it was a repeat offense. For over 40 years, Hosgun ruled Riften with a black heart and an iron fist. He imposed ridiculous taxes upon his subjects and any merchants that wished to sell their wares within the city walls. Hosgun kept most of the coin for himself, using it to construct a massive wooden castle with unnecessarily lavish quartering within. The castle took 7 years to build and became a visual reminder of the people's oppression, which earned it the nickname Hosgun's Folly. Towards the end of his reign, the streets of Riften became littered with refuse and its people plagued by disease and hunger. Then, in the 129th year of the Fourth Era, the people had finally had enough. With their numbers, they were able to temporarily overwhelm the city guard long enough to set Hosgun's Folly on fire with the greedy Jarls still within. As the fighting recommenced, the fire spread through the city unchecked. By morning, the people had emerged victorious, but not without great cost. Most of the city was now in ruins, and many had died. It took 5 years to rebuild Riften into the smaller city that it is today, and even though over 50 years had passed since then, it still had yet to fully recover. Some believe it will never achieve the level of affluence it saw at the beginning of the Fourth Era. But there are a few who still hold on to the hope that Riften can return from the ashes and become a center of commerce again. Honestly, I never sat down and read these books. They're actually really interesting. Is there more? Hi. Oh, God. Talon J. I've checked with Maramal, and I'm certain an arrangement can be made to incorporate the traditional Argonian bonding ceremonies should the need arise. It would be our pleasure to receive you at the temple and have Maramal perform a marriage ceremony between yourself and Kirava. But we request the appropriate teeth be made as we previously discussed. Whatever you decide, I wish you both the best of luck and hope to see you there soon. Drifa. You can't honestly tell me you enjoy me reading these books. And letters. Specifically the letters. Or the books. Whichever one. Ooh, A Dream of Sovngarde. My voice can't be that good. I'm stumbling over my own sentences. A Dream of Sovngarde. Apparently published by Thin Air. In a few hours, I will likely be dead. My men and I, Nords of Skyrim all, will soon join with the Emperor's legions to to attack the Imperial City. The Aldmeri are entrenched within, and our losses will be severe. It is a desperate gambit, for if we do not reclaim the city, we will lose the war. Last night, I prayed to the mighty Talos for courage and strength in the battle to come. In those last cold hours before the sun rises, I sit down to write this account of a dream I had not long after. I believe this dream was the answer to my prayers, and I would pass along the wisdom it contained to my kinsmen for the battles they will fight in the years after my passing. In the dream, I walked through mists towards the sound of laughter, merriment, and the song of the north. The mists soon cleared, and before me lay a great chasm. Waters thundered over its brim, and so deep it was I could not see the bottom. A great bridge made all of whalebone was the only means to cross, and so I took it. It was only a few steps onto the bridge that I encountered a warrior, grim and strong. "I am soon master of trials," he said to me, his voice booming and echoing upon the walls of the high mountains all around us. With a wave, he bade me pass on. I knew in my heart that I was granted passage only because I was a visitor. Should the hour come when I return here after my mortal life, the legends say that I must best this dread warrior in single combat. Beyond the bridge, a great stone longhouse rose up before me, so tall as to nearly touch the clouds. Though it took all my strength, I pushed open the towering oaken door and beheld the torch-lit feast hall. Here were assembled the greatest heroes of the Nords, all drinking mead poured from great kegs and singing battle songs. Suckling pigs turned on a long iron spit over a roaring fire. My mouth watered at the smell of roast meat, and my heart was glad to hear the songs of old. "Come forth!" cried out a hoary man who sat upon a high wooden chair. This I knew to be Ysgramor, father of Skyrim and the Nords. I approached and knelt before him. "You find yourself in Sovngarde, Hall of the Honored Dead. Now, what would you have of me, son of the North?" he bellowed. "I seek counsel," said I. "For tomorrow we fight a desperate battle, and my heart is full of fear." Ysgramor raised his tankard to his lips and drank until the cup was empty. Then he spoke once more. Remember this always, son of the North. A Nord is judged not by the manner in which he lived, but the manner in which he died." With that, he cast aside his flagon, raised his fist in the air, and roared a great cheer. The other heroes rose to their feet and cheered in answer. The sound still rang in my ears when I awoke. I gathered my men and told them of my vision. The words seemed to fill their hearts with courage. The horns are blowing, and the banners are raised. The time has come to muster. May Talos grant us victory this day, and if I am found worthy, may I once again look upon the great feast hall. Skardon Freewinter. Hopefully I'm doing well with the voices.
I don't have any business with you, so get out of my face.
You're a stranger here too, huh?
Never done an honest day's work in your life for all that coin you're carrying, eh, lass? I'm saying you've got the coin, but you didn't earn the scepter. It's all about the way they walk, what they're wearing. Oh, but that, maybe you'd like a taste.
Even if I changed it a bit to fit the voices of the people speaking.
I've got a bit of an errand to perform, but I need an extra pair of hands. And in my line of work, Extra hands are well paid. Simple. Once you have it, I want you to place it in Branchet's pocket. There's some... Now, you tell me when you're ready, and we'll get started.
Well, I didn't really change it all that much. I'm just changing it to fit what the character would be.
Good. Wait until I start the distraction. Then show me what you're made of.
Everyone, gather round. I have something amazing to show you that demands your attention. No pushing, no shoving. Plenty of room. No pushing, no shoving. Plenty. This way, everyone. Over here.
Come on, Brynjolf.
What do you think you're doing?
You never should have come here.
I'll kill you!
I'll let you live. This time. Rare opportunity. I wouldn't want you to get left out.
That's what you said about the wisp essence, and it turned out to be crushed nerve root mixed with water.
That was a simple misunderstanding. But this item is the real thing.
Lads and lasses, I give you Falma Blood Elixir.
Oh, come on. Are you...
Ha! Found you! Over here! Get off your
Just a scratch!
Son of I'll see you burn! No escape!
Down.
The problem is your disrespect for the laws of this land. It's time to face the Jarl's justice. Get out, I guess. Smart woman. Now
Well, that didn't end well.
Next time, you might want to get dressed before leaving the house.
New. Found rifting? Take my advice. Stay
Great.
The bunkhouse isn't.
I guess I expected too much from you. I didn't think you'd get... Can't say I'm surprised with the way things have been going. Nah. My organization's been having a run of bad luck. But I suppose that's just how it goes. Nah. My organization's been having a run of bad luck. But I suppose that's just how it goes. But never mind that. Even though you fouled up the job, I still think you've got the spark I'm looking for. There's plenty of gold out there for the taking, if you're up to the challenge. All right, the group, get there in one piece, and we'll see if you really got what it takes.
You.
Come to see Valaman for... Take a look.
Such a thing's not.
If you need any more smithing work, come see me again.
So I need steel ingots. Where'd you... Why do these guys...
I've never seen... The old told me that it isn't this bad everywhere.
Nothing like the smell of a white-hot blade, eh? You wish to do what I do? Very well. Looking for some armor? A weapon?
Mjol's brought me nothing but safety and peace of mind. And some lessons.
So, if I have this straight, female Argonian who's hot pink drinks every jug of milk she come across, and then I have to read every single note / book that I find.
What brings you to Balamut today? The finest weapons and armor. Need any more smithing work? Come see me again.
Legendary Argonian craftsmanship.
Nothing like the smell of a white-hot blade. Blades, helmets, pretty much anything to suit your needs. If you need any more smithing work, come see me again.
Protect yourself right. Buy armor from Wells.
Can I interest you? Take a look. Keep your eyes to the road.
Buy some armor and live to tell about it.
Gems, potions, solid green.
What could it mean? The return of the Dragonborn? Who among us could possibly hold that honor?
Aha, here we are. Time to steal my stuff back. Because I worked hard to steal all that stuff. Uh-oh. You know what time it is. A Dance in Fire, Chapter 4. By Wahin Yarth. 18 Bosmeri and 1 Cyrodiilic former senior clerk for an Imperial Building Commission trudged through the jungle westward from the Zila River to the ancient village of Vindizi. For Decimus Sculti, the jungle was hostile, unfamiliar ground. The enormous... What is with these words? The enormous vermiculated trees filled the bright morning with darkness, Jesus, and resembled nothing so much as grasping claws bent on impeding their progress. Even the fronds of the low plants quivered with malevolent energy. What was worse, he was not alone in his anxiety. His fellow travelers, the natives who had survived the Khajiit attacks on the villages of Brenos and Athe, wore faces of undisguised fear. There was something sentient about the jungle, and not merely the mad but malevolent indigenous spirits. In his peripheral vision, Scotty could see the shadows of the Khajiit following these refugees, leaping from tree to tree. When he turned to face them, the lithe forms vanished into the gloom as if they had never been there before. But he knew he had seen them, and the Bosmeri had saw them too, and quickened their pace. After 18 hours, bitten raw by insects, scratched by 1,000 thorns, they emerged into a valley clearing. It was night, but a row of blazing torches greeted them, illuminating the leather-wrought tents and jumbled stones of the hamlet of Vindizi. At the end of the valley, the torches marked a sacred site, a gnarled bower of trees pressed close together to form a temple. Wordlessly, the Bosmeri walked the torch arcade towards the trees. Scotty followed them. When they reached the solid mass of living wood, with only one gaping portal, Scotty could see a dim blue light glowing within. 1,000 sonorous moan from 100 voices echoed within. The Bosmeri maiden he had been following held out her hand, stopping him. "You do not understand, but no outsider, not even a friend, may enter," she said. "This is a holy place." Scotty nodded and watched the refugees march into the temple, heads bowed. Their voices joined with the ones within. When the last wood elf had gone inside, Scotty turned his attention back to the village. There must be food to be had somewhere. A tendril of smoke and a faint whiff of roasting venison beyond the torchlight led him. There were 5 Cyrodiils, 2 Bretons, and a Nord. The group gathered around a campfire of glowing white stones, pulling steaming strips of meat from the cadaver of a great stag. At Scotty's approach, they rose up, all but the Nord, who was distracted by the hunk of animal flesh. "Good evening. Sorry to interrupt, but I was wondering if I may have a little something to eat. I'm afraid I'm rather hungry, after walking all day with some refugees from Brenos and Athe." They bade him to sit down and eat, and introduce themselves. "So the war's back on, it seems," said Scotty amiably. Best thing for these effete do-nothings," replied the Nord in between bites. "I've never seen such a lazy creature. Now they've got the Khajiit stirring them on land and the High Elves at sea. If there's any province that deserves a little distress, it's damnable Valenwood." "I don't see how they're so offensive to you," laughed one of the Bretons. They're congenital thieves, even worse than the Khajiit, because they are so blessed meek in their aggression." The Nord spat out a gob of fat which sizzled on the hot stones of the fire. "They spread their forces with territory that doesn't belong to them, slowly infiltrating their neighbors, and they're puzzled when Elizweir shoves back at them. They're all villains of the worst order." "What are you doing here?" asked Scotty. "I'm a diplomat from the court of Gehenna, muttered the Nord, returning to his food. "What about you? What are you doing here?" asked one of the Cyrodiils. "I work for Lord Atreus' building commission in the Imperial City," said Scotty. "One of my former colleagues suggested that I come down to Valenwood. He said the war was over, and I could contract a great deal of business for my firm building what was lost. One disaster after another, and I've lost all my money. I'm in the middle of a rekindling of a war, and I cannot find my former colleague. Your former colleague, muttered another of the Cyrodiils, who had introduced himself as Regulus, or Regilius. He wasn't by any chance named Yosgiris, was he? You know him? He lured me down to Valenwood in nearly the exact same circumstances, smiled Reglius grimly. I worked for your employer's competitor, Lord Vanech's men, where Losgirius also formerly worked. He wrote to me asking that I represent an imperial building commission and contract some post-war construction. I had just been released from my employment, and I thought that if I brought some new business, I could have my job back. Girius and I met in Athe, and he said he was going to arrange a very lucrative meeting with the Sylvanar. Scotty was stunned. Where is he now? I'm not theologian, so I couldn't say. Regulus shrugged. He's dead. When the Khajiit attacked Athe, they began by torching the harbor where Girius was readying our boat. Or I should say, my boat, since it was purchased with the gold I brought. By the time we were even aware of what was happening enough to flee, everything by the water was ash. The Khajiit may be animals, but they know how to arrange an attack. I think they followed us through the jungle to Vindizi, said Scotty nervously. There was definitely a group of something jumping along the treetops. Probably one of the monkey folk, snorted the Nord. Nothing to be concerned about. When we first came to Vindizi and the Bosmeri all entered the tree, they were furious, whispering something about unleashing an ancient terror on their enemies. The Breton shivered, remembering. They've been there ever since, for over a day and a half now. If you want something to be afraid of, that's the direction to look. The other Breton, who was representative of the Daggerfall Mages Guild, was staring off into the darkness while his fellow provincial spoke. Maybe, but there's something in the jungle too, right on the edge of the village, looking in. More refugees, maybe? Asked Scotty, trying to keep the alarm out of his voice. Not unless they're traveling through the trees now, whispered the wizard. The Nord and one of the Cyrodiils, grabbed a long tarp of wet leather and pulled it across the fire, instantly extinguishing it without making so much of it as a sizzle. Now Scotty could see the intruders, their elliptical yellow eyes and long, cruel blades catching the torchlight. He froze with terror, praying that he too was not so visible to them. He felt something bump against his back, and gasped. Regulus's voice hissed from up above. Be quiet for Mara's sake and climb up here. Scotty grabbed hold of the knotted double vine that hung down from the tree at the edge of the dead campfire. He scrambled up it as quickly as he could, holding his breath lest any grunt of exertion escape from him. At the top of the vine, high above the village, was an abandoned nest from some great bird in a trident-shaped branch. As soon as Scotty had pulled himself into the soft, fragrant straw, Regulus pulled up the vine. No one else was there, and while Scotty looked down, he could see no one below. No one, that is, except the Khajiit, slowly moving towards the glow of the temple tree. Thank you, whispered Scotty, deeply touched that a competitor had helped him. He turned away from the village and saw that the tree's upper branches brushed against the mossy rock walls that surrounded the valley below. How are you at climbing? You're mad. You're mad, said Regulus under his breath. We should stay here until they leave. If they burn Vindizi the way they did Athe and Brenos, we'll be dead sure as if we were on the ground. Scotty began the slow, careful climb up the tree, testing each branch. Can you see what they're doing? I can't really tell. Wrigley stared down into the gloom. They're at the front of the temple. I think they also have... It looks like long ropes trailing off behind them, off into the pass. Scotty crawled into the strongest branch that pointed toward the wet, rocky face of the cliff. It was not a far jump at all, so close, in fact, that he could smell the moisture and feel the coolness of the stone. But it was a jump nonetheless, and in history as a clerk, he had never before leapt from a tree 100 feet off the ground to a sheer rock. He pictured in his mind's eye the shadows that had pursued him through the jungle from the heights above. How their legs coiled to spring, how their arms snapped forward in an elegant, fluid motion to grasp. He leapt. His hands grappled for rock, but thick cords of moss were more accessible. He held hard, but when he tried to plant his feet forward, they slipped up skyward. For a few seconds he found himself upside down before he managed to pull himself into a more convenient position. There was a narrow outcropping jutting out of the cliff where he could stand and finally exhale. Reglius! 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 Scotty did not dare to call out. In a minute, there was a shaking of branches, and Lord Vanif's men emerged. First, his satchel, then his head, then the rest of him. Scotty started to whisper something, but Reglius shook his head violently and pointed downward. One of the Khajiit was at the base of the tree, peering into the remnants of the campfire. Reglius awkwardly tried to balance himself in the branch, but as strong as it was exceedingly difficult with only one hand. Scotty cupped his palms and then pointed at the satchel. It seemed to pain Reglius to let it out of his grasp, but he relented and tossed it to Scotty. There was a small, almost invisible hole in the bag, and when Scotty caught it, a single gold coin dropped out. It rang as it bounced against the rock on the descent, a high, soft sound that seemed like the loudest alarm Scotty had ever heard. Then many things happened very quickly. The Cathay Rach at the base of the tree looked up and gave a loud wail. The other Khajiit followed in chorus as the cat below crouched down and then sprung up into the lower branches. Reglius saw it below him, climbing up with impossible dexterity, and panicked. Even before he jumped, Scotty could tell that he was going to fall. With a cry, Reglius the clerk plunged to the ground, breaking his neck on impact. A flash of white fire erupted from every crevice in the temple, and the moan of the Bosmeri prayer changed into something terrible and otherworldly. The climbing Cathay Rach stopped and stared. Kiergo, it gasped. The Wild Hunt! It was as if a crack in reality had opened wide. A flood of horrific beasts, tentacled toads, insects of armor and spine, gelatinous serpents, vaporous beings with the face of gods, all poured forth from the great hollow tree, blind with fury. They tore the Khajiit in front of the temple to pieces. All the other cats fled for the jungle, but as they did so, they began pulling on the ropes they carried. In a few seconds' time, the entire village of Vindizi was boiling with the lunatic apparitions of the Wild Hunt. Over the babbling, barking, howling horde, Scotty heard the Cyrodiils in hiding cry out as they were devoured. The Nord too was found and eaten, and both his Bretons. The wizard had turned himself invisible, but the swarm did not rely on their sight. The tree the Cathay Rach was in began to sway and rock from the impossible violence beneath it. Scotty looked at the Khajiit's fear-struck eyes and held out one of the cords of moss. The cat's face showed its pitiful gratitude as it leapt for the vine. It didn't have time to entirely replace that expression when Scotty pulled back the cord and watched it fall. The hunt consumed it to the bone, before it struck the ground. Scotty's own jump up the next outcropping of rock was immeasurably more successful. From there, he pulled himself to the top of the cliff and was able to look down into the chaos that had been the village of Vindizi. The hunt's mass had grown and began to spill out through the pass out of the valley, pursuing the fleeing Khajiit. It was then that the madness truly began. In the moon's light, from Scotty's vantage, he could see where the Khajiit had attached their ropes. With a thunderous boom, an avalanche of boulders poured over the pass. When the dust cleared, he saw that the valley had been sealed. The wild hunt had nowhere to turn but on itself. Scotty turned his head, unable to bear to look at the cannibalistic orgy. The night jungle stood before him, a web of wood. He slung Regulus's satchel over his shoulder and entered. Jesus!
Hey, you're not supposed to be down here. Official business only. Sure, that'll do just fine. Go on ahead.
Jesus, that killed my throat. Oh, God. You want me to keep reading? We got like 4, 5, maybe 6 books over here. I kind of need an answer. Oh, God. Okay. A Dance and Fire, Volume 3. Is this the same thing? Mother Pascal disappeared into the sordid hole that was her tavern, and emerged a moment later with a scrap of paper with Lodes Giris's familiar scrawl. Decumus Scotti held it up before a patch of sunlight that had found its way through the massive boughs of the tree city, and read, Scotti, so you made it to Valenwood. Congratulations. I'm sure you had quite I'm sure you had quite an adventure getting here. Unfortunately, I'm not here anymore, as you probably guess. There's a town downriver called Athi I'm at. Ugh, that grammar. Buy a boat and join me. It's ideal. I hope you brought a lot of contracts, because these people need a lot of building done. They were close to the war, you see, but not so close. They don't have any money left to pay. Haha. Meet me down here as soon as you can, Jirius. Oh, that grammar killed me. So, Scotty pondered. Jirius had left Valenwood and gone to some place called Athi. Given his poor penmanship and ghastly spelling, it could equally well be Athi, Afi, Othri, Imthri, Uthra, or Krakamaka. The sensible thing to do, Scotty knew, was to call this adventure over and try to find some way to get back home to the Imperial City. He was no mercenary devoted to a life of thrills. He was, or at least had been, a senior clerk at a successful private building commission. Over the last few weeks, he had been robbed by the Cathay Roch, taken on a death march through the jungle by a gang of giggling Bosmeri, half-starved to death, drugged with fermented pig's milk, nearly slain by some kind of giant tick, and attacked by archers. He was filthy, exhausted, and had he counted 10 gold pieces to his name. Now the man whose proposal brought him to the depths of misery was not even here. It was both ludicrous and seemingly to abandon the enterprise entirely. And yet, a small but distinct voice in his head told him, "You have been chosen. You have no other choice but to see this through." Scotty turned to the stout old woman, Mother Pascotti, who had been watching him curiously. "I was wondering if you knew of a village that I was at the edge of the recent conflict of Ellesweir. Is something called Athi? You must mean a Fae." She grinned. "My middle lad, Viglil, he manages a dairy down there. Beautiful country, right on the river. Is that where your friend went?" "Yes," said Scotty. "Do you know the fastest way to get there?" After a short conversation, an even shorter ride to Fallensteel's roofs the way of the platforms, and a jog to the riverbank, Scotty was negotiating transport with a huge fair-haired Bosmer with a face like a pickled carp. He called himself Captain Baltics, and even Scotty, with his sheltered life, could recognize him for what he was: a retired pirate for hire, a smuggler for certain, and probably much worse. His ship, which had clearly been stolen in the distant past, was a bent old imperial sloop. 50 gold, and we'll be in Athay in 2 days' time," boomed Captain Baltics expansively. "I have 9 gold pieces," replied Scotty, and feeling the need for explanation added, "I had 10, but I gave one to the platform ferryman to get me down here." "9 is just as fine," said the captain agreeably. "Truth be told, I was going to Athay whether you paid me or not. Make yourself comfortable in the boat. We'll be leaving in just a few minutes." Decumus Scotty boarded the vessel, which sat low in the water of the river, stacked high with crates and sacks that spilled out of the hold and galley and onto the deck. Each was marked with stamps advertising the most innocuous substances: copper scraps, lard, ink, high rock meat marked for cattle, tar, fish jelly. Scotty's imagination reeled picturing what sorts of illicit imports were truly aboard. It took more than those few minutes for Captain Baltics to haul in the rest of his cargo, but in an hour the anchor was up, and they were sailing downriver towards Athay. The green-gray water barely rippled, only touched by the fingers of the breeze. Lush plant life crowded the banks, obscuring from sight all the animals that sang and roared. At one another. Lulled by the serene surroundings, Scotty drifted to sleep. At night, he awoke and gratefully accepted some clean clothes and food from Captain Baltics. "Why are you going to Athay, if I may ask?" queried the Bosmer. "I'm meeting a former colleague there. He asked me to come down from the Imperial City where I worked for the Atreus Building Commission to negotiate some contracts." Scotty took another bite of the dried sausages they were sharing for dinner. "We were going to try to repair and refurbish whatever bridges, roads, and other structures that got damaged in the recent war with the Khajiit." "It's been a hard 2 years," the captain nodded his head. "Though, I suppose, good for me and the likes of you and your friend. Trade routes cut off. Now, they think there's going to be a war with the Somerset Isles. You heard that?" Scotty shook his head. "I've done my share of smuggling skooma down the coast, even helping some revolutionary types escape from the Maine's wrath. But now the wars have made me a legitimate trader, a businessman. The true casualties of war is always the corrupted." Scotty said he was sorry to hear that, and they lapsed into silence, watching the stars and moon's reflection on the still water. The next day, Scotty awoke to find the captain wrapped up in his sail, torpid from alcohol, singing in a low, slurred voice. When he saw Scotty rise, he offered his flagon of Jaga. "I learned my lesson during the revelry at Eastern Cross. The captain laughed, and then burst into tears. I don't want to be legitimate. Other pirates I used to know are still raping and stealing and smuggling and selling nice folk like you into slavery. I swear to you, I never thought the first time that I ran into a real shipment of legal goods that my life would turn around like this. Oh, I know, I could go back to it, but Bandar knows not after all I've seen. I'm a ruined man. Scotty helped the weeping man out of the sail, murmuring words of reassurance. Then he added, Forgive me for changing the subject, but where are we? Oh, moaned Captain Baltrix miserably. We made good time. Athay's just around the bend in the river. Then it looks like Athay's on fire, said Scotty, pointing. A great plume of smoke, black as pitch, was rising above the trees. As they drifted around the bend, the next saw the flames, and then the blackened skeletal remains of the village. Dying, blazing villagers leapt from rocks into the river. A cacophony of wailing met their ears, and they could see, roaming along the edges of the town, the figures of Khajiit soldiers bearing torches. Bandar, bless me, slurred the captain. The war's back. Or the war's back on. Oh no, whimpered Scotty. The sloop drifted with the current towards the opposite shore, away from the fiery town. Scotty turned his attention there, and the sanctuary it offered. Just a peaceful arbor, away from the horror. There was a shudder of leaves in two of the trees, and a dozen lithe Khajiit dropped to the ground, armed with bows. They see us, hissed Scotty. They've got bows. Well, of course they've got bows, snarled Captain Baltrix. We bosmen may have invented the bloody things, but we didn't think to keep them secret, you bloody bureaucrat. Now they're setting their arrows on fire. Yes, they do that, sometimes. Captain, they're shooting at us. They're shooting at us with flaming arrows. Ah, so they are, the captain agreed. The aim here is to avoid being hit. But hit they were, and very shortly thereafter, even worse. The second volley of arrows hit the supply of pitch, which ignited in a tremendous blue blaze. Scotty grabbed Captain Baltrix, and they leapt overboard, just before the ship and all of its cargo disintegrated. The shock of the cold water brought the Bosmer into temporary sobriety. He called to Scotty, who was already swimming as fast as he could toward the bend. Mr. Decumus, where do you think you're swimming to? Back to Fallensteel, cried Scotty. It will take you days, and by the time you get there, everyone will know about the attack on Athay. They'll never let anyone they don't know in. The closest village downriver is Brenos. Maybe they'll give us shelter. Scotty swam back to the captain, and side by side they began paddling in the middle of the river, past the burning residuum of the village. They thanked Mara that they had learned to swim. Many a Cyrodiil did not, as largely landlocked as the Imperial's province was. Had he been raised in mere Korup or Artemon, he may have been doomed, but the Imperial city itself was encircled by water, and every lad and lass there knew how to cross without a boat, even those who grew up to be clerks and not adventurers. Captain Baltrix's sobriety faded as he grew used to the water's temperature. Even in wintertide, the Zila River was fairly temperate, and after a fashion, even comfortable. The Bosmer's strokes were uneven, and he'd stray closer to Scotty and then further away, pushing ahead and then falling behind. Scotty looked to the shore to his right. The flames had caught the trees like tinder. Behind them was an inferno, with which they were barely keeping pace. To the shore on their left, all looked fair, until they saw a tremble in the river reeds, and then what caused it. A pride of the largest cats he had ever seen. They were auburn-haired, green-eyed beasts with jaws and teeth to match his wildest nightmares. And they were watching the two swimmers and keeping pace. Captain Baltrix, we can't go to either that shore or the other, or we'll be parboiled or eaten, Scotty whispered. Try to even your kicking and your strokes. Breathe like you would normally. If you're feeling tired, tell me and we'll float on our backs for a while. Anyone who had the experience of giving rational advice to a drunkard would understand the hopelessness. Scotty kept pace with the captain, slowing himself, quickening, drifting left and right, while the Bosmer moaned and ditties from his pirate days. Oh, moaned old ditties from his pirate days. When he wasn't watching his companion, he watched the cats on the shore. After a stretch, he turned to his right. Another village had caught fire. Undoubtedly, it was Brenno's. Scotty stared at the blazing fury, awed by the sight of the destruction, and did not hear that the captain had ceased to sing. When he turned back, Captain Baltrix was gone. Scotty dove into the murky depths of the river and over again. There was nothing to be done. When he surfaced after his final search, he saw that the giant cats had moved on, perhaps assuming that he too had drowned. He continued his lonely swim down the river. A tributary, to be noted, had formed a final barrier, keeping the flames from spreading further. But there was no more towns. After several hours, he began to ponder the wisdom of going ashore. Which shore was a question. He was spared the decision. Ahead of him was a rocky island with a bonfire. He did not know if he were intruding on a party of Bosmeri or Khajiiti, only that he could swim no more. With straining aching muscles, he pulled himself onto the rocks. They were Bosmer refugees, he gathered, even before they told him. Roasting over the fire was the remains of one of the giant cats that had been stalking him through the jungle on the opposite shore. Sinche tiger, said one of the young warriors ravenously. It's no animal. It's as smart as any cat, Cathay Ra, or Albmez, or any other bleeding Khajiiti. Pity this one drowned. I would have gladly killed it. You'll like the meat, though. Sweet from the sugar these asses eat. Scotty did not know if he was capable of eating a creature as intelligent as a man or Mur, but he surprised himself, as he had done several times over the last days. It was rich, succulent, and sweet, like sugared pork, but no seasonings had been added. He surveyed the crowd as he ate. A sad lot, some still weeping for lost family members. They were the survivors of both the villages of Brenos and Athay, and war was on every person's lips. Why had the Khajiiti attacked again? Why specifically directed at Scotty as a Cyrodiil? Why was the Emperor not enforcing peace in his provinces? I was to meet another Cyrodiil, he said to a Bosmer maiden who he understood to be from Athay. His name was Lodes Girius. I don't suppose you know what might have happened to him. I don't know your friend, but there were many Cyrodiils in Athay when the fire came, said the girl. Some of them, I think, left quickly. They were going to Vindizi, inland, and in the jungle. I'm going there tomorrow, so are many of us. If you wish, you may come as well. Nicomus Scotti nodded solemnly. He made himself as comfortable as he could in the stony ground of the river island, and somehow, after much effort, he fell asleep. But he did not sleep well. Jesus, my jaw! Oh, I gotta take a minute. Jesus. Okay. Brief History of the Empire, Volume 3. Oh, joy. A Brief History of the Empire, Part 3. By Stronach Cathoji III, Imperial Historian. The first volume of this series told in brief the story of the succession of the first 8 emperors of the Septim dynasty, from Tiber I to Quintira II. The second volume described the War of the Red Diamond and the 6 emperors that followed its aftermath, from Uriel III to Cassinder I. At the end of that volume, it was described how the Emperor Cassinder's half-brother Uriel IV assumed the throne of the Empire of Tamriel. It will be recalled that Uriel IV was not a septim by birth. His mother, though she reigned as empress for many years, was a dark elf married to a true septim emperor, Pelagius III. Uriel's father was actually Catria the First's consort after Pelagius's death, a Breton nobleman named Bolivar. Lyriat. Before taking the throne of empire, Cassinder I had ruled the kingdom of Wayrest, but poor health had forced him to retire. Cassinder had no children, so he legally adopted his half-brother Uriel and abdicated the kingdom. 7 years later, Cassinder inherited the empire at the death of his mother. 3 years after that, Uriel once again found himself the recipient of Cassinder's inheritance. Uriel IV's reign was a long and difficult one. Despite being a legally adopted member of the Septim family, and despite the Lyriat family's high position, indeed they were distant cousins of the Septims, few of the Elder Council could be persuaded to accept him fully as a blood descendant of Tiber. The council had assumed much responsibility during Catria I's long reign, and Cassinder I's short one, and a strong-willed alien monarch like Uriel IV found it impossible to command their unswerving fealty. Time and again the council and emperor were at odds, and time and again the council won the battles. Since the days of Pelagius II, the Elder Council had consisted of the wealthiest men and women in the empire, and the power they wielded was conclusive. The council's last victory over Uriel IV was posthumous. Andorak, Uriel IV's son, was disinherited by vote of council, and a cousin more closely related to the original Septim line was proclaimed Sepphoris II in the 247th year of the Third Era. For the first 9 years of Sepphoris II's reign, those loyal to Andorak battled the imperial forces in an act that the sage Eraintine called Tiber Septim's heart beating no more. The council granted Andorak the High Rock Kingdom and Schnorhelm to end the war, and Andorak's descendants still rule there. By and large, Sepphoris II had foes that demanded more of his attention than Andorak. From out in the Cimmerian nightmare, in the words of Eraintine, a man who called himself the Cormoran usurper led an army of Daedra and undead warriors on a rampage through Valenwood, conquering kingdom after kingdom. Few could resist his onslaughts, and as month turned to bloody month, in the year 249 of the Third Era, even fewer tried. Sepphoris II sent more and more mercenaries into Hammerfell to stop the usurper's northward march, and they were bribed and slaughtered and raised as undead. The second of the Cameron usurper deserves a book of its own. It is recommended that the reader find Pollux Illustri's The Fall of the Usurper for more detail. In short, however, the destruction of the forces of the usurper had little do with the efforts of the emperor. The result was a great regional victory and an increase in hostility towards the seemingly ineffectuous empire. Uriel V, Sepphoris II's son and successor, swiveled opinion back toward the latent power of the empire. Turning the attention of Tamriel away from the internal strife, Uriel V embarked on a series of invasions beginning almost from the moment he took the throne in the year 268 of the Third Era. Uriel V conquered Roscrea in 271, Cothnoque in 276, Inesle in 279, and Esronate in 284. In the year 288 of the Third Era, he embarked on his most ambitious enterprise, the invasion of the continent kingdom of Avakir. This ultimately proved a failure, for 2 years later Uriel V was killed in Akavir on the battlefield of Lonith. Nevertheless, Uriel V holds a reputation second only to Tiber as one of the 2 great warrior emperors of Tamriel. The last 4 emperors, beginning with Uriel V's infant son, are described in the 4th and final volume of this series. Oh god, the Wolf Queen. Ugh. God, this is gonna kill my throat. Alright. The Wolf Queen, Book 5, by Joachim Yarth. From the pen of Ingelisus, 2nd century sage and student of Montokai. Year 119, Third Era. For 21 years, the Emperor Antiochus Septim ruled Tamriel, and proved an able leader despite his moral laxity. His greatest victory was in the War of the Isle in the year 110, when the Imperial fleet and the royal navies of Somerset Isle, together with the magical powers of the Sigic Order, succeeded in destroying the Pinodonian invading armada. His siblings, King Magnus of Lilmoth, King Sepphoris of Bifane, and Potema, the Wolf Queen of Solitude, ruled well, and relations between the Empire and the kingdoms of Tamriel were much improved. Still, centuries of neglect had not repaired all the scars that existed between the Empire and the kings of High Rock and Skyrim. During a rare visitation from his sister and nephew Uriel, Antiochus, who had suffered from several illnesses over his reign, lapsed into a coma. For months he lingered in between life and death, while the Elder Council prepared for the ascension of his 15-year-old daughter, Kintira, to the throne. Year 120 of the Third Era. Mother, I can't marry Kintira, said Uriel, more amused by the suggestion than offended. She's my first cousin, and besides, I believe she's engaged to one of the Lords of Council, Modellus. You're so squeamish. There's a time and a place for propriety, said Potema, but you're correct at any rate about Modellus, and we shouldn't offend the Elder Council at this critical juncture. How do you feel about Princess Rachma? You spent a good deal of time in her company in Farum. She's all right, said Uriel, but don't tell me you want to hear all the dirty details. Please spare me your study of her anatomy, Potema grimaced. But would you marry her? I suppose so. Very good. I'll make the arrangements then. Potema made a note for herself before continuing. King Leromo has been a difficult ally to keep, and political marriage should keep foreign on our side. Should we need them? When is the funeral? What funeral? Said Uriel. You mean for Uncle Antiochus? Or Antochus? Of course, said Potema. Anyone else of note die recently? There are a bunch of little Redguard children running through the halls, so I guess Sepphoris has arrived. Magnus arrived at court yesterday, so it ought to be any day now. It's time to address the council then, said Potema, smiling. She dressed in black, not her usual colorful ensembles. It was important to look the part of the grieving sister. Regarding herself in the mirror, she felt that she looked all of her 53 years. A shock of silver wound its way through her auburn hair. The long, cold, dry winters in North Skyrim had created a map of wrinkles, thin as a spiderweb, all across her face. Still, she knew that when she smiled, she could win hearts, and when she frowned, she could inspire fear. It was enough for her purposes. Potima's speech to the Elder Council is perhaps helpful to students of public speaking. She began with flattery and self-abasement. My most august and wise friends, members of the Elder Council, I am but a provincial queen, and I can only assume to bring to issue that you yourselves must have already pondered. She continued on to praise the late emperor, who had been a popular ruler despite his flaws. He was a true septim and a great warrior, destroying, with your counsel, the near invincible armada of Pyendonia. But little was wasted before she came to her point. The Empress Gisela, unfortunately, did nothing to temper my brother's lustful spirits. In point of fact, no whore in the slums of the city spread out on more beds than she. Had she attended to her duties in the imperial bedchamber more faithfully, we would have a true heir to the empire, and not the half-wit milksop bastards who call themselves the emperor's children. The girl called Kintira is popularly believed to be the daughter of Gisela and the captain of the Billard. It may be that she is the daughter of Gisela and the boy who cleans the cistern. We can never know for certain, not as certainly as we can know the lineage of my son Uriel, the eldest true son of the Septim dynasty. My lords, the princes of the empire will not stand for a bastard on the throne. That I can assure you. She ended mildly, but with a call to the action. Posterity will judge you. You know what must be done. That evening, Potima entertained her brothers and their wives in the map room, her favorite of the imperial dining chambers. The walls were splashed with bright, if fading, representations of the empire and all the known lands beyond. Antemora, Yokunda, Akavir, Pyendonia, Thras. Overhead, the great glass dome ceiling, wet with rain, displayed distorted images of the stars overhead. Lightning flashed every other minute, casting strange phantom shadows on the walls. "When will you speak to the council?" asked Potima, as dinner was served. "I don't know if I will," said Magnus. "I don't believe I have anything to say." "I'll speak to them when they announce the coronation of Kintira," said Severus. Severus. Ugh. "Merely as a formality to show my support and the support of Hammerfell." "You can speak for all of Hammerfell?" asked Potima, with a teasing smile. "The Redguards must love you very much." "We have a unique relationship with the Empire in Hammerfell," said Severus's wife, Bianchi. "Since the Treaty of Stros Mackay, it has been understood that we are part of the Empire, but not a subject." "I understand you have already spoken to the Council," said Magnus's wife, Helena. Pointedly, she was a diplomat by nature, but as a Cyrodiilic ruler of an Argonian kingdom, she knew how to recognize and confront adversity. "Yes, I have," said Potima, pausing to savor a slice of braised halberd. "I gave them a short speech about the coronation this afternoon." "Our sister is an excellent public speaker," said Severus. "You're too kind," said Potima, laughing. "I do many things better than speaking." "Such as?" said Bianchi, smiling. "Might I ask what you said in your speech?" asked Magnus suspiciously. There was a knock on the chamber door. The head steward whispered something to Potima, who smiled in response, and rose from the table. "I told the council that I would give my full support to the coronation, provided they proceed with wisdom." "What could be sinister about that?" Potima said, and took her glass of wine with her to the door. "If you pardon me, my niece Kintira wishes to have a word with me." Kintira stood in the hall with the Imperial Guard. She was but a child, but on reflection, Potima realized that at her age she was already married 2 years to Mantiarco. There was a similarity, to be certain. Potima could see Kintira as the youngest queen, with dark eyes and pallid skin, smooth and resolute like marble. Anger flashed momentarily on Kintira's eyes on seeing her aunt, but emotion left her, replaced with calm imperial presence. "Queen Potima," she said serenely, "I have been informed that my coronation will take place in 2 days' time. Your presence at the ceremony will not be welcome. I have already given orders to your servants to have your belongings packed, and an escort will be accompanying you back to your kingdom tonight. That is all. Goodbye, aunt." Potima began to reply, but Kintira and her guard turned and moved back down the corridor to the stateroom. The Wolf Queen watched them go, and then re-entered the map room. "Sister-in-law," said Potima, addressing Bianchi with deep malevolence, "you asked what I do better than speaking? The answer is war." Oh lord, there's more. Wait, 3. Oh, thank Christ, I don't need to read this one again. I'm taking a breather. You're honestly telling me you enjoy this? Oh, don't just send a bunch of M's, send an actual response. Oh, my jaw. Okay, Spirit of Nirn. Spirit of Nirn by unknown author. Lorcan is the spirit of Nirn, the god of all mortals. This does not mean all mortals necessarily like him or even know him. Most elves hate him, thinking creation as that act which sundered them from the spirit realm. Most humans revere him, or aspects of him, as the herald of existence. The creation of the mortal plane, the mundus, Nirn, is a source of mental anguish to all living beings. All souls know deep down that they came originally from somewhere else, and that Nirn is a cruel and crucial step to what comes next. What is this next? Some wish to return to the original state, the spirit realm, and that Lorcan, or Lorcan, is the demon that hinders their way. To them, Nirn is a prison, an illusion to escape. Others think that Lorcan created the world as the feasting ground for transcendence. To them, the spirit realm was already a prison. That true escape is now finally possible. The Real Baron Zaya, Volume 4, by Anonymous. Everything I have ever loved, I have lost, Baron Zaya thought despondently, looking at the mounted knights behind and ahead, their tirewomen near her in the carriage. Yet I have gained a measure of wealth and power, and the promise of more to come. Dearly have I bought it. Now I do understand better Tiber Septim's love of it. If he has often paid such prices, for surely worth is measured by the price we pay. By her wish she rode on a shiny roan mare, clad as a warrior in resplendent chainmail of dark elven make. As the days slowly slipped by, and her train rode the winding road eastward into the settling rain, around her gradually rose the steep-sided mountain slopes of Morrowind. The air was thin, and a chill, late autumn wind blew constantly, but it was also rich with the sweet, spicy smell of late-blooming black rose, which was native to Morrowind and grew in every shadowy nook and crevice of its highlands, finding nourishment even in the stoniest banks and ridges. In small villages and towns, ragged dark elven folk gathered along the road to cry her name and simply gape. Most of her knightly escort were Redguards, with a few high elves, Nords, and Bretons, and they wove their way into the heart of Morrowind. They grew increasingly uncomfortable and clung together in protective clusters. Even the elven knights seemed wary. Oh, wrong way. But Baron Zaya felt at home at last. She felt the welcome extended to her by the land. Her land. Simachus met her at the Mournhold border with an escort of knights, about half of whom were Dark Elven, in imperial battle dress, she noted. There was a grand parade of entry into the city and speeches of welcome from stately dignitaries. Dignitaries. I've had the Queen's suit refurbished for you, the general told her later when they reached the palace. But you may change anything not to your taste, of course. He went on about the details of the coronation, which was to be held in a week. He was his old commanding self, but she sensed something else as well. He was eager for her approval of the arrangements. Was in fact fishing for it. That was new. He had never required her commendation before. He asked her nothing about her stay in the Imperial City, or of her affair with Tiber Septim, although Baron Zaya was certain Brelaine had told him, or earlier written him, everything in detail. The ceremony itself, like so much else, was a mixture of old and new, parts of it from the ancient Dark Elven tradition of Mournhold, the others dictated by imperial decree. She was sworn to the service of the Empire, and Tiber Septim as well as to the land of Mournhold and its people. She accepted oaths of fealty and allegiance from the people, the nobility, and the council. The last was composed of a blend of imperial emissaries, advisors they were called, and native representatives of the Mournhold people, who mostly in elders accordance with the elven custom. Baron Zaya later found that much of her time was occupied in attempting to reconcile with those two factions and their cronies. The elders were expected to do most of the conciliating in light of reforms introduced by the Empire pertaining to the land ownership and surface farming. But most of these went clean amongst the Dark Elven observances. Tiber Septim, in the name of the One, had ordained a new tradition, and apparently even the gods and goddesses themselves were expected to obey. The new queen threw herself into her work and her studies. She was through with love and men for a long, long time, if not forever. There were other pleasures, she discovered, as Simachus had promised her long ago. Those of the mind and those of power. She developed surprisingly, for she had always rebelled against her tutors at the Imperial City, a deep love for Dark Elven history and mythology, a hunger to know more fully the people from whom she had sprung. She was gratified to learn that they had been proud warriors and skilled craftsmen and cunning mages since time immemorial. Tiber Septim lived for another half-century, during which she saw him on several occasions as she was bidden to the Imperial City on one reason of state or another. He greeted her with warmth during those visits, and even had long talks together about events in the Empire when opportunity would permit. He seemed to have quite forgotten that there had ever been anything between them more than easy friendship and a profound political alliance. He changed little as the years passed. Rumor had it that his mages had developed spells to extend his vitality, and that even the one had granted him immortality. Then one day a messenger came with the news that Tiber Septim was dead, and his grandson Pelagius was now emperor in his place. They had heard the news in private, and Symmachus, the sometime imperial general, and now her trusted prime minister, took it stoically, as he took most everything. Somehow, it doesn't seem possible, Baron Zaya said. I told you, it's the way of humans. They are short-lived people. They don't really matter. His power lives on, and his son now wields it. You called him your friend once. Do you feel nothing? No grief? He shrugged. There was a time when you called him somewhat more. What do you feel, Baron Zaya? They had long ago ceased to address each other in private by their formal titles. Emptiness, loneliness, she said. Then she too shrugged. But that's nothing new. I know, he said softly, taking her hand. Baron Zaya. He turned her face up and kissed her. The act filled her with astonishment. She couldn't remember his ever touching her before. She'd never thought of him in that way, and yet, undeniably, an old familiar warmth spread through her. She'd forgotten how good it felt, that warmth. Not the scorching heat she'd felt with Tiber Septim, but the comforting, robust ardor she somehow associated with straw. Straw. Poor straw. She hadn't thought of him in so long. He'd be middle-aged by now, if he were still alive. Probably with a dozen children, she thought affectionately, and a hearty wife who hopefully could talk for two. Marry me, Baron Zaya, Symmachus was saying. He seemed to have picked up her thoughts on marriage, children, wives. I've worked and toiled and waited long enough, haven't I? Marriage. A peasant with peasant dreams. The thought appeared in her mind, clear and unbidden. Hadn't she used these very same words to describe straw so very long ago? And yet, why not? If not Symmachus, who else? Many of the great noble families of Morrowind had been wiped out in Tiber Septim's great war of unification before the treaty Dark Elves rule had been restored. It was true, but not the true nobility. Most of them were upstairs with Symmachus, and not even half as good or deserving as he was. He had thought to keep Mournhold whole and hail when their so-called counselors would have picked at its bones, sucked them dry, as Ebonheart had been sucked dry. He'd fought for Mournhold, fought for her, while she had the kingdom grew and thrived. She felt a sudden rush of gratitude, and undeniably affection. He was steady and reliable, and he'd served her well, and loved her well. Why not? She said, smiling, and took his hand and kissed him. The union was a good one, in its political as well as personal aspects. While Tiber Septim's grandson, the Emperor Pelagius I, viewed her with jaundiced eye, his trust in his father's old friend was absolute. Symmachus, however, was still viewed with suspicion by Morrowind's stiff-necked folk. Chary, with his peasant ancestry and his close ties to the Empire, but the Queen was quite unshakably popular. The Lady Baron Zaya's one of our own, it was whispered, held captive as we. Baron Zaya felt content. There was work and there was pleasure. And what more could one ask of life? The years passed swiftly, with crises to be dealt with, and storms and famines and failures to be weathered, and plots to be foiled, and conspirators to be executed. Mournhold prospered steadily. Her people were secure and fed, and her mines and farms productive. All was well, save that the royal marriage had produced no children, no heirs. Elven children are slow to come, and most demanding of their welcome, and noble children are more so than others. Thus many decades had come to pass before they grew concerned. The fault lies with me, Samichus. I'm damaged goods, Baron Zaya said bitterly. If you want to take another, I want no other, Simichus said gently. Nor do I know for certain that the fault is yours. Perhaps it is mine. Whichever. We will seek a cure. If there is damage, surely it may be repaired. How so? When we dare not entrust anyone with the true story. Healers' oaths do not always hold. It doesn't matter if we change the time and the circumstances a bit. Whatever we say or fail to say, Geoffrey the storyteller never rests. The god's inventive mind and quick tongue are ever busy spreading gossip and rumor. Priests and healers and mages come and went, but all their powers, potions, and philters produce not even a promise of bloom, let alone a single fruit. Eventually, they thrust it from their minds and left it in the gods' hands. They were yet young, as elves went, with centuries ahead of them. There was time. With elves, there was always time. Baron Zaya sat at dinner in the great hall, pushing food about on a plate, feeling bored and restless. Simichus was away, having been summoned to the imperial city by Tiber Septim's great-great-grandson, Uriel Septim. Or was it his great-great-great-grandson? She'd lost count, she realized. Their faces seemed to blur one into the next. Perhaps she should have gone with him, but there'd been the delegation from Tear on the tiresome matter that nevertheless required delicate handling. Our bard was singing in the alcove off the hall, but Baron Zaya wasn't listening. Lately all the songs seemed the same to her, whether new or old. Then a turn of phrase caught her attention. He was singing of freedom, of adventure, of freeing Morrowind from its chains. How dare he? Baron Zaya sat up straight and turned to glare at him. Worse, she realized he was singing some ancient and now immaterial war with the Skyrim Nords, praising the heroism of Kings Edward and Moraline and their brave companions. The tale was old enough, certainly, yet the song was new, and its meaning. Baron Zaya couldn't be sure. A bold fellow, this bard, but with a strong, passionate voice and a good ear for music. Rather handsome, too, in a Ralphish sort of way. He didn't look to be well off exactly, nor was he all that young. Certainly he couldn't be under a century of age. Why hadn't she heard him before, or at least heard of him? Who is he? She inquired of a lady-in-waiting. The woman shrugged and said, Calls himself the Nightingale, milady. No one seems to know anything about him. Bid him speak with me when he is done. The man called the Nightingale came to her, thanked her for the honor of the Queen's audience, and the fat purse she handed him. His manner wasn't bold at all, she decided, rather quiet and unassuming. He was quick enough with gossip about others, but she learned nothing about him. He turned all questions away with a joking riposte or a ribald tale. Yet these were recounted so charmingly it was impossible to take offense. My true name? Milady, I am no one. No, my parents named me Juan. Or was it nobody? What matters it? It matters not. How may parents give name to that which they know not? Ah, I believe that was the name. That was the name. Know not. I have been the nightingale for so long I do not remember, since last month at the very least. Or was it last week? All my memory goes into song and tale, you see, milady. I've none left for myself. I'm really quite dull. Where was I born? Why, nowhere. I plan to settle into Dunroman when I get there, but I'm in no hurry. I see. And will you then marry Atalshire? Very perceptive of you, milady. Perhaps, although I find in haste quite charming too at whiles. Ah, you're fickle then. Like the wind, my lady, I blow hither and yon, hot and cold, as chance suits. Chance is my suit, naught else wears well on me. Baronziah smiled. Stay with us a while then, if you will, my lord Erhatic. As you wish, my lady bright. Taking another breather. Jesus. Also, I believe the term Shia thought applies here. Oh. I only got one more to read, and it's about Camel Z, or Camel Z. You're the one that wants me to stop and read all these. I've been at this for 2 hours. I'm not stopping. The Ruins of Camel Z by Rollard Nordson. With the acclamations of the Fellows of the Imperial Society still ringing in my ears, I decided to return to Morrowind immediately. It was not without some regret that I bade farewell to the flesh pots of the Imperial City, but I knew that the wonders I had brought back from Raled Makai had only scratched the surface of the Dwemer ruins in Morrowind. Even more spectacular treasures were out there, I felt, just waiting to be found, and I was eager to be off. I also had before me the salutary example of poor Bannerman, who was still dining out on his single expedition to Black Marsh 20 years ago. That would never be me, I vowed. With my letter from the Empress in hand, this time I would have the full cooperation of the Imperial authorities. No more need to worry about attacks from superstitious locals. But where would I look next? The ruins of Camel Z were the obvious choice. Unlike Khalid Makai, getting into the ruins would not be a problem. Also known as the Cliff City, Camel Z lies on the mainland side of the Vardenfell Rift, sprawling down the sheer coastal cliff. Travelers from the east coast from Vardenfell often visit the site by boat, and it can also be reached overland from the nearby villages without undue hardship. Once my expedition had assembled in the Seda Neen, with the usual tedious complications involved in cooperating with this half-civilized land, we set out for the village of Marog, near the ruins, where we hoped to hire a party of diggers. My interpreter, Tuan Panai, an unusually jolly fellow for a dark elf who had hired in Seda Neen at the recommendation of the local garrison commander, assured me that the local villagers would be very familiar with the Camel Z, having looted the site for generations. Incidentally, Tenpenny, as we soon came to call him to his constant amusement, proved invaluable and would recommend him without hesitation to any of my colleagues who were planning similar expeditions to the wilds of Morrowind. At Marog, we ran into our first trouble. The hetman of the village, a revered, elegant old fellow, seemed willing to cooperate, but the local priest, a representative of the absurd religion they have here, worshipping something called the Tribunal, who they claim actually live in the palaces in Morrowind, was fervently against excavating the ruins. He looked likely to sway the villagers to his side with his talk of religious taboos, but I waved the Empress's letter under his nose and mentioned something about my friend the garrison commander of Sedanin, and he quieted right down. No doubt this was just a standard negotiating tactic, arranged among the villagers to increase their pay. In any event, once the priest had stalked off muttering to himself, no doubt calling down curses upon the heads of the foreign devils, we soon had a line of villagers eager to sign onto the expedition. While my assistant was working on the mundane details of contracts, supplies, etc., Master Aram and I rode on to the ruins. By land, they can only be reached using the narrow paths that wind down the face of the cliff from above, where any misstep threatens to send one tumbling into the sea foaming about the jagged rocks below. The city's original entrance to the surface must have been in the part of the city to the northeast, the part that fell into the sea long ago when the eruption of Red Mountain created this mind-bogglingly vast crater. Jesus. After successfully navigating the treacherous path, we found ourselves in a large chamber, open to the sky on one side, disappearing into the darkness on the other. As we stepped forward, our boots crunched on piles of broken metal, as common in dwarven ruins as potsherds in other ancient sites. This was obviously where the looters brought their finds from deeper levels, stripping off the valuable outer casings of the dwarven mechanisms and leaving the innards here, easier than lugging the intact mechanism back to the top of the cliff. I laughed to myself, thinking of the many warriors unwittingly walking around Tamriel with pieces of dwarven mechanisms on their backs for that. For that, of course, is what most dwarven armor really is, just the armored shells of ancient mechanical men. I sobered when I thought of how exceedingly valuable an intact mechanism would be. This place was obviously full of dwarven devices, judging from the litter covering the floor of this vast chamber, or had been, I reminded myself. Looters have been working over this site for centuries. Just the casing alone would be worth a small fortune, sold as armor. Most dwarven armor is made of mismatched pieces from various devices, hence its reputation for being bulky and unwieldy. But a matched set from an intact mechanism is worth more than its weight in gold, for the pieces all fit together smoothly, and the wearer hardly notices the bulk. Of course, I had no intention of destroying my finds for armor, no matter how valuable. I would bring it back to the Society for scientific study. I imagined the astonished cries of my colleagues as I unveiled it at my next lecture, and smiled again. I picked up a discarded gear from the piles at my feet. It still gleamed brightly as if new made, the dwarven alloys resisting the corrosion of time. I wondered what secrets remained hidden in the maze of chambers that lay before me, defying the efforts of looters, waiting to gleam again in the light they had not seen in long eons. Waiting for me. It remained only to find them. With an impatient gesture to Master Ariam to follow, I strode forward into the gloom. Master Aram, Tenpenny, and I spent several days exploring the ruins, while the assistants set up camp at the top of the cliff and hauled supplies and equipment from the village. I was looking for a promising area to begin excavation, a blocked passage or corridor untouched by looters that might lead to completely untouched areas of the ruins. We found 2 such areas early on, but soon discovered that the many winding passages bypassed the blockage and gave access to the rooms behind. Nevertheless, Even these outer areas, for the most part stripped clean of artifacts by generations of looters, were full of interest to the professional archaeologists. Behind the massive bronze door, burst from its hinges by some ancient turmoil of the earth, we discovered a large chamber filled with exquisite wall carvings, which impressed even the jaded Tenpenny, who claimed to have explored every dwarven ruin in Morrowind. They seemed to depict an ancient ritual of some kind, with some long line of classically bearded dwarven elders processing down the side hallways, all seemingly bowing to the giant form of a god carved into the front wall of the chamber, which was caught in the act of stepping forth from the crater of a mountain in a cloud of smoke and steam. According to Master Aram, there are no known depictions of dwarven religious rituals, so this was an exciting find indeed. I set a team to work prying the carved panels from the wall, but they were unable to even crack the surface. On closer examination, the chamber appeared to be faced with a metallic substance with the texture and feel of stone, impervious to any of our tools. I considered having Master Aram try his blasting magic on the walls, but decided that the risk of destroying the carvings was too great. Much as I would have preferred to bring them back to the Imperial City, I had to settle for taking rubbings of the carvings. If my colleagues in the society showed enough interest, I was sure a specialist could be found, perhaps a master alchemist, who would find a way to safely remove the panels. I found another curious room at the top of the long winding stair, barely passable due to the fall of rubble from the roof. At the top of the stair was a dome chamber with a large ruined mechanism at its center. Painted constellations were still visible in some places on the surface of the dome. Master Aram and I agreed that this must have been some kind of observatory, and the mechanisms were therefore the remains of a dwarven telescope. To remove it from the ruins would require a complete disassembly, which fact no doubt had preserved it from the attention of looters. So I decided to leave it in place for the time being. The existence of this observatory suggested, however, that this room had once been above the surface. However, closer examination of the structure revealed that this was indeed a building, not an excavated chamber. The only other doorways from the room were completely blocked, and careful measurements from the top of the cliff to the entry room and then to the observatory revealed that we were still more than 250 feet below the present ground level. A sobering reminder of the forgotten fury of Red Mountain. This discovery led us to focus our attentions on downward. Since we now knew approximately where the ancient surface lay, we could rule out many of the higher block passages. One wide passage, impressively flanked with carven pillars, particularly drew my interest. It ended in a massive rockfall, but we could see where looters had begun and then abandoned a tunnel through this debris. With my team of diggers and Master Aram's magery to assist, I believed we could succeed where our predecessors had failed. I therefore set my team of dark elves to work on clearing the passages, relieved finally to be beginning the real exploration of Camelzay. Soon, I hoped, my boots would be stirring up dust that had lain undisturbed since the dawn of time. With this exciting prospect before me, I may have driven my diggers a bit too hard. Tenpenny reported that they were beginning to grumble about the long days and that some were talking about quitting. Knowing from experience that nothing puts heart back into these elves than a taste of the lash, I had the ringleaders whipped and the rest confined to the ruins until they had finished clearing the passageway. Thanks Stendar for my foresight in requisitioning a few legionaries from Seda Neen. They were sullen at first, but with the promise of an extra day's wages when they broke through, they soon set to work with a will. With these measures, while these measures may sound harsh to my readers back in the comforts of civilization, let me assure you that there is no other way to get these people to stick to a task. The blockage was much worse than I had at first thought, and in the end it took almost 2 weeks to clear the passage. The diggers were excited as I was when their picks finally broke through the far end into the emptiness, and we shared a round of the local liquor together, a foul concoction in truth, to show that all was forgiven. I could hardly restrain my eagerness as they enlarged the hole to allow entry into the chamber beyond. Would the passage lead to entire new levels of the ancient city, filled with the artifacts left by the vanished dwarves? Or would it be only a dead end, some side passage leading nowhere? My excitement grew as I slid through the hole and crouched for a moment in the darkness beyond. From the echoing sounds of the stones rattling beneath my feet, I was in a large room, perhaps very large. I stood up carefully and unhooded my lantern. As the light flooded the chamber, I looked around in astonishment. Here were wonders beyond even my wildest dreams. As the light from my lamp filled the chamber beyond the rock fall, I looked around in astonishment. Everywhere was the warm glitter of dwarven alloys. I had found an untouched section of the ancient city. My heart pounded with excitement. I looked around me. The room was vast, the roof soaring up into darkness above the reach of my lamp. The far end lost in shadows, with only the tantalizing glimmer hinting the treasures not yet revealed. Along each wall stood rows of mechanical men, intact except for one oddity. Their heads had been ritually removed and placed on the floor at their feet. This could mean only one thing. I had discovered the tomb of a great dwarven noble, maybe even a king. His burials of this type had been discovered before, most famously by Ransom's expedition to Hammerfell, but no completely intact tomb had ever been found. Until now. But if this was truly a royal burial, where was the tomb? I stepped forward gingerly. The rows of headless bodies, standing silently as they had for eons, their disembodied eyes seeming to watch me as I passed. I had heard wild tales of the curse of the dwarves, but had always laughed it off as superstition. But now, breathing the same air as the mysterious builders of this city, which had lain undisturbed since the cataclysm that spelled their doom, I felt a twinge of fear. There was some power here, I felt, something malevolent that resented my presence. I stopped for a moment and listened. All was silent. Except it seemed I heard a faint hiss, regular as breathing. I fought down a sudden surge of panic. I was unarmed, not thinking of danger in my haste to explore past the blocked passage. Sweat dripped down my face as I scanned the gloom for any movement. The room was warm, I suddenly noticed, much warmer than the rest of the labyrinth thus far. My excitement returned. Could I have found a section of the city still connected to the functioning steam grid? Pipes ran along the walls, as in all sections of the city. I walked over and placed my hand on one. It was hot, almost too hot to touch. Now I saw that in places where the ancient piping had corroded, small drips of steam were escaping, the sound I had heard. I laughed at my own credulity. I now advanced quickly to the far end of the room, giving a cheerful salute to the ranks of mechanical soldiers who had appeared so menacing only moments before. I smiled with triumph as the light swept back the darkness of centuries to reveal the giant effigy of a dwarven king standing on a raised dais, his metal hand clutching his rod of office. This was the prize indeed. I circled the dais, slowly, admiring the craftsmanship of the ancient dwarves. The golden king stood 20 feet tall under a freestanding dome cupola, his long, unswept beard jutting forward proudly as his glittering metal eyes seemed to follow me. But my superstitious mood had passed, and I gazed benevolently at the old dwarven king. My king, as I had already begun to think of him. I stepped onto the dais to get a better look at the sculpted armor. Suddenly, the eyes of the figure opened, and it raised a mailed fist to strike. I leapt to the side as the golden arm came crashing down, striking sparks from the steps where I had stood a moment before. With a hiss of steam and the whir of gears, the giant figure stepped ponderously out from under its canopy and strode towards me with a frightening speed, its eyes tracking me as I scrambled backwards. I dodged behind a pillar as the fist whistled down again. I had dropped my lantern in the confusion, and now I crept into the darkness outside the pool of light, hoping to slip between the headless mechanisms and thus escape back to the safety of the passageway. Where had the monster gone? You would think that a 20-foot golden kind would be hard to miss, but he was nowhere to be seen. The glittering lamp only illuminated a small part of the room. He could be hiding anywhere in the gloom. I crawled faster. Without warning, the dim ranks of dwarven soldiers in front of me went flying as the monstrous guardian loomed before me. He had cut off my escape. As I dodged backwards, blow after blow whistled down as the implacable machine followed me relentlessly, driving me into the corner of the room. At last, there was nowhere left for me to go. My back was to the wall. I stared up at my foe, determined to die on my feet. The huge fists lifted for one final blow. The room blazed with sudden light. Bolts of purple energy sparked across the metal carapace of the dwarven monster, and it halted, half turned to meet this new threat. Master Aram had come. He was about to raise a cheer when the giant figure turned back to me, unharmed by the lightning bolt hurled by Master Aram, determined to destroy this first intruder. I shouted out, "Steam! Steam!" as the giant raised his fist to crush me into the floor. There was a hiss and a gust of bitter cold, and I looked up. The monster was now covered in a shell of ice, frozen in the very moment of dispatching me. Master Aram had understood. I leaned against the wall with relief. The ice cracked above me. The Golden King stood before me, the shell of ice falling away. His head swiveled towards me in triumph. There was no stopping this dwarven monstrosity. But then the light faded from his eyes, and his arms dropped to his sides. The magical frost had worked, cooling its steam-driven energy. As Master Aram and the diggers crowded around me, congratulating me on my narrow escape, my thoughts drifted. I imagined my return to the Imperial City, and I knew that this would be my greatest triumph yet. How could I possibly top this find? Perhaps it was time to move on, recovering the fabled Eye of Argonia. Now that would be a coup. I smiled to myself, reveling in the glory of the moment, but already planning my next adventure. Oh, my jaw. Oh. Oh. You know, if you like this, I could start reading the lore from Destiny 2. It's all very interesting with how it connects. No! No! Ugh.
Welcome to Riften, home of the Thieves Guild.
Shut up, guard. God damn it. My head. My jaw. My tongue, specifically. Okay. The Song of Pelennial, Volume 4, On His Deeds. Editor's note, Volume 1 through 6 are taken from the so-called remain manuscript located in the Imperial Library. It is the transcription of older fragments connected by an unknown scholar of the early Second Era. Beyond this, little is known of the original sources of these fragments, some of which appear to be from the same period, perhaps even from the same manuscript. But as no scholarly consensus yet exists on dating these 6 fragments, no opinions will be offered here. Pollennial drove the sorcerer armies past the Neben, claiming all the eastern lands for the rebellion of the Paravania, as Kain had to send her rain to wash the blood from the villages and force that no longer flew Aliad banners, for the armies of men needed to make camps of them as they went forward. And he broke the doors open for the prisoners of Vatash, with the slave queen flying on Morahos above them. And men called her Al-Esh for the first time. He entered the gate to win back the hands of the 1,000-strong Sedor, a tribe now known but famous in those days, which the Aliad had stolen in the night, 2,000 hands that he brought back in the wagon made of demon bone, whose wheels trailed the sound of women still ill at heart. Text lost. And after the first pogrom, which consolidated the northern holdings for the men of Creth, he stood with white hair gone brown with elf blood at the bridge of Heldum, where Peril's falconers had sent for the Nords, and they, looking at him, said that Shor had returned, but he had spat at their feet for profaning that name. He led them away into the heart of the hinterland west, to drive the Aliads inward, toward the Tower of White Gold, a slow retreating circle that could not understand the power of man's sudden liberty, and that fury idea that brought. His mace crushed the Thunderachs that Umaril sent as harriers on the rebellion's long march back south and east, and carried Morihaus, breath of Kain, the Threolus, the clever cutting man, Anaid with a Keptu name, for healing when the bull had fallen to a valley of birdbeaks. And, of course, at the Council of Skiffs, where all the Paravania's armies and all the Nords shook with fear at the storming of White Gold, so much so that Alesh herself counseled delay. Pollennial grew furious, and made names of Umaril, and made names of what cowards he thought he saw around him, and then made for the tower by himself, for Pollennial often acted without thought. For those who don't... Shush. For those who don't know, Pollennial is actually the Crusader that you could play as in Oblivion. You could get his armor and weapons. And yeah, he fought against the Aliads, which were an ancient... they were an ancient society of elves.
Vermin creeping around the Red Way.
God damn it. Why?
The Thieves Guild used to run this city.
Okay.
Now they're nothing but braggarts and bullies.
Volume 5.
Down in their rat way.
Oh, thank God I don't need to read Volume 5 again. Fuck me.
The Imperialists think us all lawless beasts. I'm proof of their ignorance. There's an apothecary in town, yeah. But it's down on the lower walkway, so stay sharp if you go down there.
Yeah. Need I really continue? Need I really continue? This counts as stealing, just so you know. See? It says steal.
If those Whiterun guards can take down the dragon, so can we. Trouble?
Okay, just for the sake of time, I'm skipping over those books. I forgot how many books there are in Skyrim. Please have mercy. You just got like 2 hours and 20 minutes of me reading books. Yeah. Why not?
Got to keep my eyes open. Damn dragons could swoop down
So,
anytime.
could we please set new guidelines for what books I read, or am I just gonna have to read the next book I find?
They say Ulfric Stormcloak murdered the High King. With his voice.
New in town, eh? Here for the fishing, I guess.
Beautiful baubles and gleaming gemstones over here.
Gems, potions, exotic ingredients, what and all.
Hello.
I don't know, Droff. They'd skin us alive if they knew we were doing this.
Over here! That's your face! Huh?
Hello. Got it. One gold. Oi!
What was that?
Uh-huh. I will take that. Ow! Nope. Nope. Ooh. Fine. Yay. Beggar by Revan. Eslaf Errol was the last of the litter of 5 born to the Queen of Prosperous, Nordic kingdom of Erelgard. Lapricopa and her husband, the king of Erelgard, Itzlof. During pregnancy, the queen had been more than twice as wide as she was tall, and the act of delivering took 3 months and 6 days after it had begun. It is perhaps understandable that the Lapricopa elected, upon expelling Eslaf to frown, say, "Good riddance," and die. Like many Nords, Itzloaf did not care very much for his wife, and less for his children. His subjects were puzzled, therefore, when he announced that he would follow the ancient tradition of his people of Atmora of following his beloved spouse to the grave. They had not thought they were particularly in love, nor were they aware that such a tradition existed. Still, the simple people were grateful for the little royal drama alleviated their boredom, which was and is a common problem in the more obscure parts of northern Skyrim, particularly Wintertide. He gathered his household staff and his 5 fat, bawling little heirs in front of him, and divided his estate. To his son, Enough, he gave his title. To his son, Lernu, he gave his land. To his son, Suobot, he gave his fortune. To his daughter, Lysfira, he gave his army. Wise advisor has suggested he keep the inheritance together for the good of the kingdom, but Itzloaf did not particularly care for his advisors, or the kingdom for that matter. Upon making his announcement, he drew his dagger across his throat. One of the nurses, who was rather shy, finally decided to speak as the king's life ebbed away. "Your Highness, you forgot your 5th child, little Esel, or Eslife, or Esli." "Good," Ichloaf groaned. It is somewhat hard to concentrate with blood gushing from one's throat, after all." The king tried in vain to think of something to bequeath, but there was nothing left. finally he spluttered irritably. Islife should have taken something then, and died. That a babe, but a few days old, was expected to demand his rightful inheritance was arguably unfair. But so Esli Arol was given his birthright with his father's dying breath. He would have nothing but what he had taken. Since no one else would have him, the shy nurse, whose name was Druspa, took the baby home. It was a decrepit little shack, and over the years that followed, it became more and more decrepit. Unable to find work, Druspa sold all her furnishings to buy food for little Esli. By the time he was old enough to walk and talk, she had sold the walls and the roof as well, so they had nothing but a floor to call home. And if you've ever been in Skyrim, you can appreciate that is scarcely sufficient. Druspa did not tell Esli the story of his birth, or that his brothers and sisters were leading quite nice lives with their inheritance, for, as we have said, she was rather shy and found it difficult to broach the subject. She was so painfully shy, in fact, that whenever he asked any questions about where he came from, Druspa would run away. That was more or less her answer to everything: to flee. In order to communicate with her at all, Esli learned how to run almost as soon as he could walk. He couldn't keep up with his adopted mother at first, but in time he learned to go toe heel if he anticipated toe heel if he anticipated a short but fast sprint, and heel toe if it seemed Druspa was heading for a long distance marathon flight. He never did get all the answers he needed from her, but Eslaf did learn how to run. The kingdom of Erelgard had, in the years since Eslaf was growing, become quite a grim place. King Inof did not have a treasury, but Swoibud had been given that. He did not have any property for income, but Lernu had been given that. He did not have an army to protect the people, but Lysivtra had been given that. Furthermore, as he was but a child, all discussions in the kingdom went through Enof's rather corrupt council. It had become a bureaucratic, exploitable land of high taxes, rampant crime, and regular incursions from neighboring kingdoms. Not a particularly unusual situation, but a kingdom of Tamriel, but an unpleasant one nonetheless. The time finally came when the tax collector arrived to Druspa's hovel, such as it was, to collect the only thing he could, the floor. Rather than protest, the poor shy maid ran away, and Eslaf never saw her again. Without a home or a mother, Eslaf did not know what to do. He had grown accustomed to the cold open air in Druspa's shack, but he was hungry. "May I have a piece of meat?" he asked the butcher down the street. "I'm very hungry." The man had known the boy for years, often spoke to his wife about how sorry he felt for him, growing up in a home with no ceilings or walls. He smiled at Eslaf and said, "Go away, or I'll hit you." Eslaf hurriedly left the butcher and went to a nearby tavern. The tavern keeper had been a former valet at the king's court, and knew that the boy was by right a prince. Many times he had seen the poor ragged lad in the streets, and sighed at the way fate had treated him. "May I have something to eat?" Eslaf asked this tavern keeper. "I'm very hungry." "You're lucky I don't cook you up and eat you," replied the tavern keeper. Eslaf hurriedly left the tavern. For the rest of the day, the boy approached the good citizens of Erelgard, begging for food. One person had thrown something at him, but it turned out to be an inedible rock. As night fell, a raggedy man came up to Eslaf and said, without saying a word, handed him a piece of fruit and a piece of dried meat. The lad took it, wide-eyed, as he devoured it. He thanked the man very sweetly. If I see you begging on the streets tomorrow, the man growled, I'll kill you myself. There are only so many beggars we at the guild allow in any one town, and you make it one too many. You're ruining business. It was a good thing as Eslaf Errol knew how to run. He ran all night. Eslaf Errol's story is continued in the book, Thief. Taking it. Much like a certain dragon I know.
Huh. I suppose I can work with your face. After all, the sculptor cannot always choose the finest
This one is different.
We've all heard that one before, Fred. Yourself.
Well, well. Color me impressed, lass. I wasn't certain I'd ever see you again. Reliable. So, now that I've whetted your appetite, Leor, I want you to explain to them the Kirava. Do this right, and I can promise you, honestly, the debt is secondary here. What's more important is that you get the message across. A word of warning, though. I don't want any of them killed. Bad for business. Good. If you need any details on your marks, I'll be here. Now get going. I'll be here when you're done.
If you're looking for conversation, the flagon is Beckel and me, we have a thing going. You don't impress me, so don't even try.
Stay out of trouble, or there's gonna be trouble.
Oh, shut up. This is true. Jesus. Well, who was the one that made me read for 2.5 hours straight? Who was the one that, when I said my throat was getting raw, said, read until your throat bleeds?
Protect yourself right. Buy armor from
Exotic
Grelka.
ingredients, I'll have them all.
You literally said you like the sound of my voice when I read the stories.
Here for a rule. I've already told that buffoon that I'm not paying you people a cent. Look around you. I'm barely keeping this rat hole together. The war's seen to that. Come on, give it your best shot.
Who taught you to fight? Keep those hands
Please stop. I'll pay. Take it.
My skill in battle is
Well, I mean, really? It's lore. I don't mind reading lore, it's just there's a lot of it. But yeah, would you like me to read the lore cards from Destiny? They're actually not half bad.
So, can I interest you in anything today? What? Oh, it's... So Brynjolf doesn't even bother to show up himself anymore, eh? What's the... You're gouging me for what little coin I make, and you can't even protect yourselves? Ridiculous. Don't fool yourself. It's only a matter of time. I'm going to make you sorry for this. Come on. Let's see what you're made of. Please, no more. I'll pay. I'll pay. Here.
I mean, do you want me to log in and read them now? It'll end the stream, so I need to start up another... Well, no. I'll start up another stream for that. Another day. For right now, Skyrim. Because if there's a lot of lore in this game, there's more in that one. And you gotta find it all.
It's you. I know who you are. Please, there's no need for that here. Message understood. Here, I even have the payment. Look, I got the message. What else did you want?
Sorry about the mess. Keeping this place clean is quite a chore.
Look, I got the message. What else did you want?
Surviving a Hork Attack by Hademir Starkad. In my travels through Skyrim, I run into many northern fishermen and hunters with intriguing tales of their encounters with Horkers. The stories are varied, ranging from deadly attacks to a girl who claimed she was saved from drowning. I have taken it upon myself to compile some of these for those who journey along the frozen coast. Our first tale is of a hunter named Grom. He claims that one night, while turning in after a long day of trapping, he saw a great shadow cast on the wall of his tent. Did he get the Horker, or did the Horker get him? Grom was a great strapper, working in the frozen tundra collecting fox pelts, but as he was about to fall asleep one night, he heard some noises coming from outside his tent. His first instinct was to remain calm and see if the beast would pass, but after some threatening roars, Grom slowly made for his axe. The creature detected his movement and began to thrash around using its great tusks to shred the hunter's tent and knocking the hunter off balance. As he stumbled, Grom was able to use the frost spell scroll, but the ice magic seemed to have diminished effect on the Horker. That tidbit may be of use to someone out there. After recovering from the stagger, Grom was able to steady himself, and with a few great cleaves killed the Horker. Though his camp was in ruins, Grom was lucky to walk away with only a slight goring on his left leg. Drawing of Horker tusks. Grom's parting comment was that if you do encounter a Horker, remain calm and remember that if you survive, the meat and tusks will fetch a nice bit of gold at market. You know, as many books as I've found already, if I do a certain quest for the Mages College, there is literally an entire room with about 30 to 40 books in it. That is my nightmare. Could you imagine how long I'd be in that room? What do you mean, yeah? Be specific. Yeah, probably being very generous there.
Stay out of trouble, or there's gonna be
So, job's done and you even brought the gold. Best of all, you did it clean. I like that. Dumping bodies and keeping the guards quiet can be expensive. Well done. And here you go. I think you'll find these quite useful. Judging from how well you've handled those I think you'll do more than just what's on your mind. We've run into a... Tell you what, you keep making us coin, and I'll worry about everything else. Now, if there are no more questions, how about following me and I'll show you what we're all about.
So, you're Brynjolf's new protege, eh? Don't look like much to me.
Welcome to the cozy little family. I'm one of the lookouts for the guild. I watch Delvin's back.
I already know there's going to be another book.
Let me show you the operation. Then you can ask your questions.
Open the door. Go. This is a welcome reprieve from having to read all those books. Books. If I'm not mistaken, there's one sitting underneath one of these beds.
Mercer, this is the one I was talking about. Our new recruit.
This better not be another waste of the guild's resources, Brynjolf.
I smell cheese.
Before we continue, I want to make one thing perfectly clear. If you play by the rules, you walk away rich.
Nice sword.
You break the rules and you lose your share. No debates, no discussions. What we say, when we say. Do I make myself clear? Good, then I think it's time we put your expertise to the test.
I suggest you... Wait a moment. You're not talking about Goldenpool, are you? Even our little Vex couldn't get in.
You claim this recruit possesses an aptitude for our line of work. If so, let her prove it. Golden Glow Estate is critically important to one of our largest clients. However, the owner has suddenly decided to take matters into his own hands and shut us out. He needs to be taught a lesson. Brynjolf will provide you with the details.
Mercer, aren't you forgetting something?
Hmm? Oh, yes. Since Brynjolf assures me you'll be nothing but a benefit to us, then you're in. Welcome to the Thieves Guild.
Welcome to the family, lass. I'm expecting you to make us a lot of coin, so don't disappoint me. Simple. Do as you're told and keep your... You should talk with... Oh, you talk to Tamelia in the Flagon. She'll set you up with your new armor. Golden Glow stated, we need you to teach him a lesson by... The catch is that you can't burn the whole place to the ground. That important client Mercer mentioned would be furious if you did. Aye. The last thing we want to be doing is... Maven prefers that Arangoth remains alive. But if he tries to stop you from getting the job done, kill him. The guild has a lot riding on this. Don't make me look foolish by mucking it up. You watch yourself on that island. Those mercenaries don't take prisoners.
Got a minute? Wanted to say something. I've never seen anyone. My father told me he found me as a. All he found in my pocket was. No one does. I must have spent every last coin I've made with the guild trying. Perhaps. But if not, if they actually thought it was fitting, I suppose. I appreciate that. Be seen.
Keep your eyes on Sapphire. There's more to her than meets the eye. What is she, a transformer? Uh-huh.
You're not really allowed in here, you know.
I'm getting near the sweet spot. He says as he breaks another pick. And another. Oh, hey. What do you mean, A? Yeah. Advances in Lockpicking by Unknown. I'm not a writer. I'm a thief. I'm a good thief. I'm not such a good writer. Anyway, I want to write about picking locks. I read a book about designing locks once. It was good. It gave a lot of details. Some guys make locks with angled keyholes. Always carry a bent lockpick. They will work good in these locks. I do, and I open lots of locks. Sometimes I carry copper lockpicks. Copper bends easily. That way I can bend it right there. Copper lockpicks break easy too. Be careful. Sometimes the locks have weird springs. They all spring differently, which makes picking it hard. I hold my torch close to the lock. This makes it hot. When it's hot, the springs are all the same. They don't bounce so differently anymore. Be careful not to burn yourself. Some thieves can't read. If you can't read this, get someone to read this book to you. It will make more sense then.
My sister in crime. What do you need?
Well, the thing is, I've got a carry weight, so.
Radio fight. Let me guess. He just plucked you off the street and dropped you.
So you're the new recruit, huh? Well, looks like you and I are gonna have to get very well acquainted. I'm the fence down here. You come by anything you don't exactly own, and I'll pay you some coin for it. I can also provide a few supplies useful to our trip. Sure, how about I get Dirge to knock you over your head and dump you into the cistern? Look, I've been in this business a long time, and I've seen all types. You can play it tough, or you can play it smart. Whatever. At the end of the day, you'll find that all we care about down here is how much gold you can make us. Good. Then there isn't... Here's your armor. Just make sure you put it to good use. Until next... Welcome to the... Some may call this junk. Me, I call them treasures. All right, then.
Heard they're reforming the Dawn Guard. Vampire hunters or something. In the old fort in Rift. Might consider joining up myself.
How can Talos bless you, my child? He's the and despite a devout Nord would rather fall in battle and have his blood spill upon the earth than allow the Empire to strike his name from the divinity. Talos is part of our culture. He's part of our heritage and our tradition. He's Skyrim personified. To suddenly have all that wrenched away is like losing someone you hold dearly in your heart. When the fighting began, she died out there, only having tended to the wounded soldiers for a few months. We never even found her body. The Empire burned all the dead.
Hey, you want to see an absolute asshole?
Those who shirk their duties will get an extra beating. Do I make myself clear?
Yes, Skrelin.
And one more thing. I will hear no more talk of adoptions. None of you riffraffers getting adopted, ever. Nobody needs you. Nobody wants you. That, my darlings, is why you're here. Why you will always be here. Until the day you come of age and get thrown into that wide, horrible world.
Oh, I will. This is how you start the Dark Brotherhood questline.
We love you, Skrelin.
Well, part of it. You can kill her ahead of time.
It's better. Now scurry off, my little gutter snipes.
You really shouldn't be here.
Oh god, books.
This is an orphanage, not an inn. Be gone from here.
Alright, plain and simple, I'm cutting off the stream right here. I need rest, and I'm a little worn out from reading all those books. That is 3 hours or so of books and Skyrim.